Well, let's talk more on Africa Day, and to help us reflect on this day is Dr. Charles Sinkala, an international relations expert. Dr. Sinkala, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time and patience. I thought we could play you some of these, which were the discussions, were some of the commentary on this day, at least by South Africans here, in observance of this day. When Africa, or should I say the OAU, that's the predecessor to the AU, when it was formed on this day back in 1963, the aim was to promote African unity and cooperation. How far have we gone in achieving that vision?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to the viewers and listeners across the African continent and the peoples of Africa, wherever they are. It is a point of interrogation, Tolly, that we celebrate this day again this year. You know, but we have achieved so much that we can point at. But, you know, the convention of the 23 heads of states and government in 1963 in Addis Ababa, hosted by His Emperor Haile Selassie, had a vision and the charter which they depicted in terms of the formation of the Organization of African Unity. Among them that Africa must educate herself, among them that Africa must treat herself when she's sick, among them that Africa should produce her own food and feed herself, and Africa must be the determinant on the direction and the end result of where Africa should be. But fast forward years, we regained our independence, but political independence was short-lived when the liberation movement started celebrating, and they forgot that they must also attain the economical power. Now we can see that this time around, you know, we are fighting over the economical power. We still are not in control in terms of determining what we're supposed to export and what's supposed to import. I often talk about the importation of toothpicks in Africa. It's a laughable matter that we still are importing toothpicks in Africa and failing to industrialize our continent. And these are issues that we still need to interrogate and find out where are we going wrong and why are we not achieving what was tabled up in 1963.
Yeah, we'll talk about trade in a moment. Let's stick with matters of peace and security. And these continue to be a headache. When this organization was formed back then, the representation of nations here, I think it was about 33, as you've mentioned. We now have the AU that comprises 55 states of Africa that come together to try and solve issues such as the conflict in the DRC, the conflict in Sudan. Have we done well in trying to silence the guns, as the leaders would often say?
Well, Tolly, the silencing of the gun will be the point of departure. Yes, Robert Gabriel Mugabe was a AU chairperson at that time. You know, Africa cannot silence the guns at the moment as we continue to fight for the independence and the continuous liberation of the African continent and the peoples of Africa. You know, we have to interrogate why are we having security breaches within the continent. You know, I hear South Africans are stranded there in Rwanda, where they have told them to withdraw and leave the arms for them to have a safe passage back to South Africa, those who are doing the peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, eastern part to be precise. But these are issues that continues to threaten the independence and the security of the African continent, as was, and we are seeing now on the southern part and western part, rather, of the African continent, those are under the military rule. It is through those military rule that we can see that their constitutions has been suspended, you know, for them to portray a government of the people so that they can pursue the agenda for the people. Now, if they go with the conventional governments of the African continent, it's got bottlenecks because of the treaties that has been signed, especially with the West and the United States of America. talking very quickly about security and unity and, uniting among the African countries, it is a laughable matter that we can still see how President Cyril Ramaphosa was attacked by President Trump in terms of allegedly white genocide in South Africa. None of the African leaders have seen, to this time I'm speaking to you, that they have come up to support South Africa and condemn the assertion by the United States of America and this president that indeed there's peace in South Africa as it was in the as compared to what it was in the apartheid time. Unity of African continent continues to punch below the her weight, and these are the issues that we are facing.
You're drawing me back, Dr. Sinkala, because you see, that is a very enticing discussion to have when you talk about the recent developments, what happened to the South African president when he was at the White House. You say that not a single African leader has come up to say there is no genocide in South Africa. What in the world is the US president talking about? Do you think that they fear punishment? Perhaps some of them rely on the United States for funding of any nature.
It can be only the latter, Tolly, because the United States of America, like any other nation, in terms of dominance, they first, give grants to those nations. And if whatever they have to say, they have to support the United States policy. If they speak against the United States of America, we can see now that other grants such as the PEPFAR, the CDC and USAID were temporarily withdrawn, and we could see how African leaders started crying foul to the United States of America that they may reinstate that funding. That is the biggest problem and the challenge that Africa is. Until today, we are not independent. And even if they can see the people crying and dying and just next door here in Zimbabwe, they cannot speak against the United States of America because they have put sanctions since 1900 since 1908 after it gained our independence. And as well, they can't speak against the United States of America when former President Barack Obama, intentionally and willfully went in Libya and killed Colonel Gaddafi, the sitting president in that nation. So these are the issues that Africa continues to have problems. Until Africa, can feed herself, mine her own food, and feed herself without looking elsewhere, we shall continue to be subservient to other nations.
And it's a sad state of affairs when you put it like that. Let's quickly conclude the conversation around the promotion of trade. It was May of 2019 when the African Continental Free Trade Area, whose aim is to boost intra-Africa trade, that's when it was entered into among these countries. How are we doing on that score? I remember what you said at the beginning, and that is that it is embarrassing for the continent of Africa to be importing a small thing such as the toothpick.
Yes, Solly, that inter-Africa free trade agreement was not initiated by the African continent because Africa has forever been demanding that Nigeria should sell crude oil to South Africa, Zambia, and other nations. But the system which has been put in place and the treaties that have been signed that Nigeria should first export to the United States of America, to Saudi Arabia, to the United Kingdom, and from the United Kingdom that Africa should import back that oil. It has always been there. The initiators of the Africa Intercontinental Free Trade Agreement was that the bigger superpowers such as China or United States of America should equally trade, but to God save the glory. How can China trade with South Africa or just sell Lesotho on an equal footing? It can't be, So that's why you can see that all these importations of finished products that can even be produced within the African continent. I mean, the seats of those Mercedes-Benz and the BMW people they like in South Africa, that we have always spoken about, that for the market for Africa, less industrialized Africa, to create employment, it is against the war. And this has continued to be a challenge. Until then, that African leaders can sit in one room. And, it also reminds me, Tolly, as I conclude, that during the apartheid time, South African government demanded from the United States of America that an exchange rate of R1 to $1 should be take precedence. Otherwise, South Africa wouldn't deal with America. And I think Africa should reach at that point where it can demand her place. We can see now that what has happened from the United States of America this week, has shaken the BRICS Council, and we hope to see that the BRICS Council, can be an alternative to the conventional United Nations, which has been predominantly of the United States umbilical cord.
Dr. Charles Sinkala, international relations expert, thank you very much for your time tonight.